Bună ziua și bine v-am regăsit. Am promis de curând continuarea dialogului cu Bryan Jardine și asta vom face. Trecem la partea poate și mai interesantă pentru mulți dintre voi. Cum vede un avocat american care trăiește de 30 de ani în România, România ca țară, ca economie, ca piață a avocaturii. Hi Bryan and welcome
Cosmin.
back.
Thank you very much. Good to be back.
Are you ready to jump in abruptly for our second topic?
If I can remember where we left off, absolutely.
I'm going to help you.
Okay.
So, the purpose is to discuss about Romania as a country, as an economy, and of course with a focus on the legal market. And now, speaking generally about Romania as a country. As a country you have been living in for 29 years, and next year we are going to celebrate your 30th year here in Romania.
That's right.
How do you describe Romania's evolution as a country as a whole, late 90s compared to 2010, compared to 2020, and with final destination 2025?
Well, I mean, it's nothing short really of astonishing when you look at how far this country has come. And I think sometimes, I hate to say, oftentimes when I'm sitting in an Uber or a taxi, I may hear the complaints of the driver, reminiscing about how great things were in the past. But I find that hard to reconcile. And again, I'm not like just an expat who's jumped off the plane. I've been here for 30 years. I've seen the changes with my own eyes. And I just think, again, it's astonishing. And, for many Romanians, they tried to historically benchmark themselves against, I don't know, the United States or England, which I don't think was necessarily at that time realistic. But in many indicators, I think Romania is actually surpassing the West. And we've talked about this, everything from some of the infrastructure that's being delivered now. I mean, if you look at, for example, you mentioned in the last broadcast, if we remember what Otto Penn was like in 1997, and looking at it now and comparing, sadly, to many of the regional and even international airports in the United States, we can see the level, they haven't been overhauled or investment hasn't occurred in many, many years. I think similarly in many of the retail and restaurants and I'm sure critics could argue, well, yeah, that's great if you make money, but for the average Romanian, these advantages aren't available. But in point of fact, if you look at the overall, the macroeconomic statistics, it's the old saying, a rising tide floats all boats, and you're seeing that the GDP is improving. The opportunities that many young Romanians have now, I think their parents and grandparents could have only dreamed about. So I think it's on the right path. It's, in my view, unfortunate with some of the recent political developments because I think that discredits just how much progress Romanians managed to make. And not just because of the EU. A lot of it's been because of the talent of the Romanian citizenry, their commitment to a more, let's say, prosperous future for the country. And it would be a shame to see Romania backslide in a way that perhaps, I lived, as I said earlier, in Hungary for several years, and it's really unfortunate to see the direction that country has gone. I think Romania has wonderful potential, and again, what they've managed to do from 99 to 2010 to now, the evolution, I use the analogy, it's oftentimes like, when you look in the mirror every day, you don't see the subtle changes that take place as you age. But when you look at a picture, when you look at a picture from 25 years ago, you say, oh, how young I looked, how, much thinner I was, or how better I looked. But I think when Romanians look back 25 years, I think it's much more dramatic and stark. If you look again, the streets would be littered with garbage. You'd have stray dogs roaming in packs. You'd have, Dacia 1310s belching out diesel fumes and trucks that were and buses and the noise and the dirt and the general chaos. Versus now, some of the parks are just beautiful. We would never take our dog to the park because the dog would either get attacked by other dogs or its paws would be bleeding from stepping on broken glass and broken bottles. It was not a safe place. All of the playground equipment for the children was broken. And I think now when you take your kids on a Saturday, you go through Herăstrău Park or you go to some of the other parks in Bucharest or you go bike riding. I mean, it's really a livable city. And there's, not just Bucharest, but if you get into the periphery and you go into some of the areas, I have a lot of interest and love for Dealu Mare. I have some property up there and I'm very excited to see that on December 23rd, they finally opened up the A7 highway from the A3 to Mizil, which I think will bring a lot of tourism to that region. So you're seeing this in all the highway sections that are opening up finally, after many years of waiting, that are going to unlock potential in places like Moldova and Iași, and so Romania's made great strides. And I think Sure. Is it perfect? No. I mean, there's always ways we could have done better or things could be better. But I think taken in totality, it's really remarkable what Romania's been. And it's one of the reasons why I've decided to stay here, because I wouldn't stay in the country if I felt it had been backsliding or if I felt that it was going, in the negative direction. I feel quite the contrary. I think despite everything and despite, oftentimes I think Romanians are their most own worst critics. And they tend to look at the glass half empty as opposed to half full.
That's a genetic, unfortunate feature for many Romanians.
Yeah.
I agree. Now, while listening to you, and I can hardly describe how satisfied I am, and is not nationalism or anything. It's a sort of I'm happy to hear an objective confirmation, because I feel it the same. I'm. In the 90s, I was not mature enough to actually understand economically and everything what's going on. But after starting the legal profession, I have the same feeling. I mean, my theory is that economically wise, Romania's evolution in the last 25 years is a miracle.
Absolutely.
That's the word.
And I mean, you have to let's look at, there's other countries. I mean, Romania is to some extent fortunate and blessed because of its geopolitical position as well. If we were, and no discredit to sub-Saharan African countries, but if we were a sub-Saharan African country, there would not have been this level of opportunity and growth because of the location, because Romania was sort of embraced into the European Union and into NATO. It's opened up opportunities that wouldn't otherwise exist, because as a standalone country of 19 million people in southeastern Europe, it may not be so interesting, but it fits into the more, let's say, the map of Europe. It's blessed as a country with many, natural resources. It's a beautiful country in terms of geography. You've got the mountains, you've got the seaside. And, I know some people would say, well, the Black Sea coastline, it's not the Mediterranean. Okay, but it's something. I mean, there's many countries in Europe that don't even have a coastline. You've got the Delta, the Danube Delta. You've got
geographically, we've got everything.
I mean, and you've got some, and the people are warm and they really have that Latin, again, as opposed to other Eastern European countries where they have let's say more of a colder approach. I mean, I found the Romanians to be very warm when they find out you're a foreigner. They're very friendly, and it's just, I have many American friends who worked here who have actually relocated here. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's a country that has tremendous potential, and as you've said rightfully, I think has made remarkable progress. And I think oftentimes it's underappreciated. Let's put it that way. It's not really. Again, if you turn back the clock and some of the little things we had to deal with. I mean, why wake up in the morning? You've got 5G telephony. You have none of in the old days we'd have to watch the cable TV with 3 channels or whatever, and then reruns of old American movies. Now we've got all the Netflix and all the choice that anybody could want. We're fully integrated. We have all the technology. We have the shopping. We have the e-banking. We have all of the modern amenities that. I mean, I still remember standing in line at Banco Rex, having to wait to get a stack of 2,000 lei notes, old lei, the Romanian old lei, and 100, a million lei notes, and everything was cash denominated. Everything had to be done in cash. People couldn't accept electronic payments, and now the economy is a much smoother operating. I mean, we're a functional economy.
Yeah. One final comment on this very interesting overview that you provided. Your job forces you indirectly to travel in the region. Your law firm is based in Vienna. I suppose you go monthly there. You are the coordinator of the energy practice Theiss, and I know you travel and you have, I see in the news that the deals that you coordinate in Poland and the other jurisdictions. As objective as you can be in terms of how you feel the evolution, the economical evolution as country and as a legal market of our neighbors, mm-hmm. Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Romania. In a nutshell, how do you see Romania in comparison with
I can tell you an anecdote. In the early 2000s, as I said, I used to work in Hungary in the Budapest office of Squire Sanders, but I would want to come down because I spent probably 70% of my time in Bucharest and 30% in Budapest. And my colleagues in Budapest could never understand, why do you want to go back to Bucharest? Because in their mind, once you cross the border, you entered a land of gypsies and stray dogs and all this negativity. And it's a lot of it's stereotypes that have been built up over the years. But I always would say to them, you mark my words, in 10 years, I mean, Hungary, it's a beautiful country, lovely people, but it's 8 million. and the economy was much more advanced than Romania. I said, it's just a matter of time. Romania is it's sort of a sleeping giant. It's going to wake up in the region, and we've seen that. I mean, I can tell you
now.
Well, and not just that, but also that's on a macro level. But on a micro level, what I'm proud to say is that the Bucharest office for many years has been the number 2 office behind Vienna in terms of revenues, in terms of profitability. We've recently been eclipsed by Poland, but that's only because we actually acquired another office 2 years ago. So we basically almost doubled the size of the Polish. So it's now the largest office in terms of headcount outside of Vienna. So they have eclipsed us, but it's a much bigger market. Let's be honest, Poland's some 40 million people. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'm still very proud to say that, okay, we slipped from second to third, but it's more logical given the size of the countries. But Romania continues to be one of the big drivers of our firm. I mean, I think that, if I'm not mistaken, the last statistics I saw that, we're in 13 countries, but over 10% of the firm-wide revenues come out of Romania.
And just to sum up on this, is not just the fact that the Romanian Theiss branch is managed properly by somebody I know, but it's also the market that helps.
Absolutely. No, I think, as I said earlier, the expression a rising tide floats all boats. And I've talked to we have a collegial, we're in, competitors, but we have relationships with other competitors. We know them.
Of course.
And I think the consensus view has been, since COVID, it's been a good business, a good market for the legal profession. I think every lawyer that I talk to has expressed the same view, that they've experienced growth in their practice, their growth in their headcount. And we've seen many of the larger firms have even seen spin-offs, split-offs. Some of the younger lawyers may be saying, I think the market's strong enough, or I have a good enough book of business that I'm going to try and make it on my own. And that's healthy. We see these changes in the market. We see spin-offs and we see mergers. We see it's a very fluid market, but that's the way a healthy market should be, because it shows that many lawyers are willing to take the risk and put out their own shingle and make a go of it. And I think that's what keeps the profession dynamic.
You already touched upon is like a perfect transition to my next line of questions. This year, the legal profession celebrates its 30th anniversary. Actually, the legal profession was born in 1995 by means of enactment
Law
of
51,
Law 51 per 95. You have been here 29 out of the 30 years, so we are in a perfect position to answer the following question. How do you see, in terms of, maturity, overall picture, status of the legal market in Romania in comparison with other markets that you know, and what do you foresee, what is safe to anticipate as to its future, in the following 10, 15, 20 years?
Well, I think some of the challenges are not unique to Romania. We talk about these. We attend conferences that concern about AI and how that may impact our profession, and some of the digitalization advances and things of that nature. The changing, let's say, work ethic, if you can call it that, at the younger, lawyers. The idea of working remotely and all these, technical opportunities and challenges that we face as a profession. But I still believe that, one of the things we aspire to as lawyers is to go beyond the commodity work, and the ultimate is to be more than just a lawyer, is to be a trusted advisor. And I think as a trusted advisor, having those interpersonal relationships with your clients, those will never be eclipsed by AI. And I think what we'll see so that's a general observation on the legal profession. With regard to the specifics of Romania, I think it's fair to say that in the early days, there was almost you got a handicap in the sense that these international lawyers, I don't want to say they were arrogant, but they almost presumed that the local Romanian lawyers were not going to be sophisticated enough to handle certain concepts or structures and things. And to some extent they were right, because it wasn't because the Romanian lawyers were stupid. They just hadn't been exposed to some of these multinational, multilateral deals. What's happened now is you don't get that handicap anymore. There's an expectation that it doesn't matter if you sit in Bucharest or London or New York. If you're an M&A lawyer, you have to operate at the highest levels of capability and expertise. They don't give you, the benefit of the doubt. They don't give you, a mulligan, as they say in golf. You have to be on your game, and the market has matured. And let's be honest too, the deal value, the transactions, some of the big ticket deals that we've seen in the market over the last 10, 15 years, and not just the privatizations from the early days, but the real, the big sort of private player transactions, would have taken place. And it's beyond just M&A. I tend to be biased because I look at that. But look at projects,
M&A,
look at
real estate,
arbitration,
projects,
litigation. It's across
real
the board,
estate.
Millions, and it went from being a big deal in Romania, I don't know, 20 years ago would have been 20 million dollars. They didn't do them in euro back then.
20 million now is not even average. It's
exactly
small,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, we look for tickets, 200-300 million euro. Those are considered, and still small. Okay, New York, it would be a rounding error, but we're not New York. But where we are in the region, I think we've come into a level now where we can be proud of what we've accomplished. Another area I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth is in the capital markets with the Bucharest Stock Exchange. I mean, we've seen Warsaw eclipse the Vienna Exchange. I think there's no reason we can't do more listings and IPOs through the Bucharest Stock Exchange. We should aspire to be more like Warsaw in that respect, and we could be a regional capital markets for the region. And we could see startups and other companies listing, accessing new sources of capital, and we see some of these. Unicorns like WePath and some of these others, or eMag, or some of these companies that have started from purely Romanian capital that have grown and gone cross-border. And I think this is a future too. And for the lawyers in Romania, and we've seen this, and it's quite gratifying, where in the old days, the UK or New York lawyers would hire us as local counsel. Now more and more we get hired as lead counsel, and we subcontract UK or New York lawyers, and it's sort of the tail wagging the dog. But it's really nice to see that on some big deals they're done under Romanian law, and there might be some elements that would require foreign lawyer to be involved, where we've had my partners and we've coordinated cross-border deals across 4 or 5 Wolf Theiss jurisdictions, but being led out of Bucharest, and we may bring in, because there may be a UK legal opinion needed, for example, and we'll subcontract a UK Magic Circle firm or a local firm if need be. So, it's not just a one-way deal flow. It's not the UK-US firms instructing the local Romanian firm, but now they're very keen when we visit them in New York and London to let us know that they're also available, and we can be a source of business for them. So it works. It's a two-way street now.
Yes. Another angle. If somebody monitors the legal market, the criterion to take into account would be the players, the law firms, not necessarily the deals or the opportunities for lawyers. One fair conclusion to draw would be that the market is quite stable in terms of rankings, the biggest law firms, the biggest players and everything. And on the other hand, if the same neutral observer would be asked to draw a conclusion as to name one salient feature of this market as far as the players are concerned, that would be a huge number of spin-offs.
Yeah.
You already touched upon. My question is, why so many spin-offs? I mean, so many means so many in my subjective perspective. I understand practically or on case-by-case basis why it happens, but looking at the entire market during or for the last 3 or 5 years, to see that the number of spin-offs is tens in a market that is not huge, we are not United States, for me it sounds, peculiar, and I wouldn't dare to provide an explanation. That's why I'm asking you.
Well,
why so many spin-offs?
Well, it's interesting you ask. One of the things that I noticed in the early 2000s when I was working in Hungary that was a real contrast, and I will answer your question, but it's sort of a lead up. One of the big contrasts between the Hungarian, the local market in Budapest and what we saw in Bucharest was in Hungary, the market was truly dominated by the large international firms. Mm-hmm. There weren't really local firms there were some, but they weren't really at the stature. Versus in Romania, where you had all of these top local law firms, like your firm, Zamforescu, Nestor, Mushat, Popovici, all of these firms that, and subsequently Tsuko in 2005. So you had a market that wasn't dominated by the international firms. You had very strong local incumbents who did very good legal work, and so they were able to compete on a level playing field with the international firms and secured a lot of work at very high levels. And I think, though, what's happened, and this is my speculation, but as some of these sort of founding partners are moving towards retirement, maybe some of the, let's say, young, ambitious partners or senior associates or counsel within those law firms are seeing that maybe rather than handle the succession as the older partners, the founders phase out, they see this as the time to go out on their own and set up. And they could look at a firm like, Tsuka, which is the perfect example in '05 when they left the Mushat firm, which was a top firm and still is a big firm. But they were able to grow that and create a very dominant local player.
Indeed.
And we've seen other examples of that where lawyers have struck out. So for many of the younger lawyers now, they're looking at that and saying, okay, there was this example of all of these young, aggressive, and ambitious partners who struck out on their own in the mid to late 2000s. We're seeing the demographic evolution of some of these incumbent, local firms that have been around for 30 years. And they got the experience, they had the access and exposure to top clients. They saw the example of some of these spin-offs from 10, 15 years ago, and they're looking now as a time when, it's as the pie is growing larger, that even if they take a slice of it, it's still bigger, having enough to feed. And what I can anticipate may happen is many of these spin-offs, some of them may not succeed, some of them may fold back, some of them may return to the firms from which they left. They may merge with other spin-offs. So you'll see that kind of dynamism in the market. And I think that's a healthy thing. So when you're young and you're in your 30s and 40s, if you're not going to take a chance, you may not succeed, but I like the entrepreneurial spirit of some of these lawyers.
From their perspective, I'm sure. But imagine, let's be optimistic, and let's imagine that during the following 20 years, economically and as a legal market, Romania will continue to grow. I don't think it is normal, or you should expect on a market that is now like this, and it will be hopefully like this in 15 years, the number of significant players should be 230, out of which 120 are 2 to 12 lawyers.
Right.
I don't like this perspective.
I don't think I think the only way that some of these smaller boutique firms can succeed is if they really focus on a specialized area. So, and we've seen this also in the U.S., with the growth of some of these boutique firms, which started in Silicon Valley to service some of the tech clients, 25, 30 years ago. And I think, you may see sort of niche players, maybe a local firm out of, Cluj, that the partner went to school with a couple of IT engineers, and maybe he builds, this will be his client, that he will grow with the client. In some of the instances in the U.S., many of these firms like Wilson Sonsini and Cooley Godward, who started in Silicon Valley, they were taking actually equity in some of their clients. I'm not sure if that's possible under the bar rules locally, but the point being that they were willing to put some skin in the game and take some risk with their client.
Yeah,
and I think that if I were a younger lawyer in my late 20s, 30s, I would look at that as a potential. I think it will be very challenging to go out there and say, okay, I'm going to compete on arbitration with Zamfarescu firm. I'm going to compete on corporate M&A with, with Wolf Theiss or with Nestor, or I'm going to go out there and compete on banking with Clifford Chance or some other Cameron McKenna, So the point is, it's very difficult for them because, let's be honest, at the end of the day, it sounds cynical, but for many of those big firms, they carry a larger insurance. So, and they also have the name, it's the old saying, nobody got fired for hiring Clifford Chance on a deal, right? And we fight against that all the time, but the reality is true. If you're sitting in the city of London, they say, okay, we work with this law firm. Do they have an affiliated office in Bucharest? That's who we're working with. Yeah. And if they don't, then give me the top 3 firms and chambers, and we'll put out an RFP. Yeah. So if you're a young lawyer saying, I'm going to do M&A on huge ticker, I'm going to do an exit arbitration with no experience, it's almost impossible. You'd have to be in a firm like yours, for example, that have the arbitration experience to grow and develop, and then perhaps you might have the opportunity to go out and carve out your own little piece of the pie. But I think for anyone who really wants to jumpstart into it, it's to look at some of these new areas of law, things like, cryptocurrency, AI, some of these tech areas that are real hot. GDPR was hot a few years ago, data processing, data privacy, IPIT generally, TMT. These are all hot areas where young lawyers are predominantly moving into that, because for older guys like us, a lot of the stuff you have to know the technology. Indeed. And you have to interact, and the CEO may be a 30-year-old guy. And so if you're 60-something trying to relate, you work better if you're a young lawyer, that you're on the same sort of wavelength
in all
with
these fields. The young lawyers are naturally in a better position than, let's say, the mature ones. Another question, Bryan. Will there ever be a moment when Romania becomes attractive for the biggest global law firms? We all know the story. Clifford Linklaters was was here, and after many successful years they decided to leave. Alan and Overy was for some years, and then they remained only in an association. Now, are we going to witness soon a moment when Magic Circle, either London-based or American law firms, are going to say, I want in Romania? Or
I don't think so. I think there probably just isn't a business case at this time. I think when a lot of them came into in the mid to late 90s, in many instances it was a situation where the partner, we saw this at Squire Sanders, they opened an office in Prague, I think in 1992, and the partner they sent over was not a corporate lawyer, but they sent them over because they were a Czech national, or their parents had emigrated from the Czechoslovakia, so they were setting up offices opportunistically, and like Linklaters, they made a lot of money, but only once those privatizations sort of ended, they were no longer able to compete in the local market, because you can't really charge, I don't know, £600 or £700 sterling an hour in the local market and be competitive. And so I think for a big firm, like you said, like a Magic Circle, big New York firm, I don't see the market as a standalone market being big or attractive enough. And also given, as you mentioned earlier, with the fragmentation, and you've got a lot of startups and things, that are coming out, these firms can undercut on price. I just don't see that as, being, you may get a firm that will set up an affiliation perhaps if there were a large multi-year infrastructure project that might justify having a physical presence. But I think even now with the technology and everything being done, by Skype or not Skype, Zoom, or Microsoft Teams, I mean, physical presence is even less and less necessary.
And for one or several projects, the experience shows that there are multiple ways to get your hands on the client and on the deal without actually setting up a branch here.
Exactly. Many times, they secure the client back in the States, for example, and they may, have parachute somebody in to work, through a secondment or working together with a local firm. There's ways to do it without, think about the cost. You have to set up a physical office. You've got to, you got to hire the people. It's quite a capital investment.
It's a huge headache.
Yeah. And I think those days are probably behind. And not to say that the market isn't interesting or that it wouldn't attract. We see on some of the big RFPs that go out from some of the state-owned enterprises, if it's Hydroelectrica or, and I mean, you've seen this, if there's a big arbitration, all of the big arbitration law firms want to partner up with a firm like yours, and they want to come in and create a consortium, and we ourselves are working on a consortium. So it's a situation where I think that would be more likely, where you would see large international, they still see opportunistic let's say deals or arbitrations where they want to have exposure to Romania, but they will most likely do it through consortia arrangements.
Yeah, so ad hoc basis rather than permanent. Now, final question, Bryan. Imagine that a lot of young and very talented lawyers are going to watch our episode, our talk together. Imagine a 5-year outstanding lawyer, very young, still only 5 years of experience, or under 30, be it energy or project finance or arbitration, it doesn't matter. What would be your advice for he or she, that fantastically talented, hardworking lawyer? Which is the advice? What is essential for he or she to make sure that the career avenue is going to continue upwards towards the preferred destination?
Well, I kind of alluded to it earlier, and that is that, one of the things that struck me actually when I first came to Romania, what attracted me was that, you had to by necessity be a generalist. You sat at your desk and you would get a request for everything from a corporate M&A or a banking deal, or it was a very general market at that time. You didn't have specializations. And in contrast, one of the reasons I left the U.S. is because they tend to pigeonhole you as a young associate. You get into an area of law that maybe you just happen to work on one deal, and then suddenly you became the specialist, or you work closely with that partner, and you suddenly found yourself after 5 years you're in an area of law that you're not particularly excited about, or it's not something that you're interested in.
You're a prisoner. You're a
prisoner. And this was to some extent, again, I was a 7-year associate litigation. I remember when I gave my notice, the partner was like, you're crazy, you're going to be a partner. And I said, look, I want to do international. My undergrad was in foreign service at Georgetown, and I really wanted exposure. I saw the big changes happening in Eastern Europe. I said, that's where I want to be. And I think for a young lawyer, what's important is to first and foremost identify an area that you're interested in. So if you're a techie guy and you see that this is what you like to do, or you want to be focused on this, find an area of law that lends itself to that. If you want to get into energy, or you're really into environmentalism, I have a friend who was a big surfer in Southern California. He became an environmental lawyer. He worked in-house counsel for Greenpeace, and then he went on to work for a big San Diego law firm doing environmental law, and he's very successful, and he loves it. But it all started from his love of surfing and the ocean, and being against pollution. So I think it's important, sort of follow your passion, what you really want to do. Don't go into an area of law just because you think it may be lucrative or it's something that's a hot button for that time. Really find an area, because if you find the area and you like what you're doing and get to know the industry or the area very well beyond just the legal aspects, really immerse yourself, understand all of the technical jargon, what it means to know the industry, because your clients are going to expect you to do that. And if you really know their business, because you may have many clients, but your client only wants to have one lawyer, and they want you to be sort of their partner, their trusted advisor, as I said earlier. So really find the area of law that fascinates you. The beauty of a law degree is, many lawyers, friends of mine, had law degrees, chose not to practice law. It can open doors to a lot of other. One of my friends went on to work for Crocs, and now he's working for a company in Colorado that designs camper vans. But he's a business guy. He went and got an MBA also at Thunderbird in Arizona. So he sort of has a law degree, so he understands the way these things work, but he chose not to practice. So a law degree may also open up opportunities. You may want to go in-house with a startup. It's a very versatile degree to have. So my recommendation, again, it was a Joseph Campbell said in the 1960s, follow your bliss was his expression. If you follow your bliss, meaning you do something you're really passionate about, you're excited, the success will come. But if you just follow something because you think that's where the money's at, you may end up being miserable. So that's my advice. Do what you like. Find the area of law that suits you. It may not even be, again, as a practicing lawyer, but you're never going to go wrong having the grounding and the training as a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. That is very wise, and I read a lot. Many wise people suggest the same thing. As long as you do the thing that you love, for sure you are going to be successful. Yeah. Bryan, it was a fantastic dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me, Cosmin, and I really welcome the opportunity. I hope that something I've said here today may be of interest and value to your listeners.
I'm sure, and as I'm sure you know, when we set up this project, the podcast, we felt that this is something missing, and we need, as professionals, as a community, we need this kind of dialogues. They are going to help one way or another, for sure, the market and everybody into that continuous growth that is necessary. And I'm pretty sure we will have other opportunities to discuss and to comment on Romania generally, and the legal market, Romanian legal market, continue to thrive.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Bryan.
That's what I anticipate. Thank you, Cosmin.
Okay. Cheers.
Have a nice day.
La revedere, toate cele bune.